Hello, everyone. I don't enjoy fighting with my parents. Thankfully, we rarely do, but last August, we grappled over whether or not I should take a year off of school to focus on handling my health struggles that started as a result of a bad case of COVID-19. My parents had a meeting with various important people at my high school regarding this prospect. No decisions were made, and my parents were just trying to help me figure out what was best. But when I found out about the meeting, I was horrified as I envisioned missing my senior year. Shock numbed me, and I lashed out at them for their part in this preliminary conversation with the school. Afterwards, I began to shut my mom out, and a rift grew between us. Instead of deciding with my parents what I should do for the next year, I started to make my own plan. I loved my created disconnection. I felt independent and in control for the first time since my sickness had begun. The sensation that I could make these decisions on my own was encouraging, but no matter how much I tried to tell myself otherwise, the wall I put up between us was consequential. After all, my mom is my most dedicated supporter. From bringing me delicious spinach smoothies every morning to always reminding me about college applications, she's been there for me every step of the way. This wall separating my mom and me only stayed up for about 2 weeks, and I remember vividly the night that it tumbled down. As I combed my hair and put on my best clothing for a fantasy football draft, I heard a knock on my door. My mom entered, and we yelled, cried, and expressed ourselves for an hour. We spoke the raw truth of how my sickness over the past 5 months and our recent disconnection had affected both of us. We then apologized. We hugged it out and began to talk about how to handle the coming school year. By really opening myself up to her for the first time in a while, practicing empathy and listening to her, I was able to form a deeper connection. I got COVID during spring break in 2022. I was quite sick for almost 2 weeks. I was confused. Why was something that everyone else described as being a light cold affecting me so much? I was in shape and drinking lots of fluids. Despite my best efforts, the virus was still getting the best of me. I had zero energy, couldn't focus, and had all the symptoms of a bad flu. After spring break, I returned to school, and I was a zombie. I had trouble concentrating in classes, and I spent my days confused while drifting in and out of consciousness. That spring semester is a blur to me. I remember taking painkillers every morning, feeling a constant fog in my head, and having trouble explaining my odd demeanor, as no one seemed to understand it. Despite prayers, hopes, and lots of pills, I stayed sick. As time went on, my symptoms got worse. Once summer came around, I was bitter and nearing an abyss. Along with brain fog, constant head pain, nausea, and overwhelming fatigue, I began to develop mood symptoms. They grew from random waves of sadness to a constant depression, and I found myself in a cycle of misery. But despite my all-encompassing symptoms, I tried to convince myself that I wasn't chronically sick. Even after 4 months, I couldn't accept my condition for what it was. The rest of the summer was the worst of my sickness. Along with my symptoms, I was on heavy medication which had a range of debilitating side effects. Medical tests, endless doctor's appointments, shots in my head, and prescription after prescription brought no clarity. With each unsuccessful attempt to cure my mysterious illness, I became more frustrated, and I believed more that everything was just in my head. I would spend hours in my bed with the lights off and the door closed, rarely leaving the house. I endured hopelessly. August came, and the school year loomed. I could think of many reasons that I wouldn't be able to make it through my senior year, and few that I would be able to. However, when I got to my school, Trinity, in September, I found an amazing support team. Lots of help enabled me to not miss a single day of the first quarter. It was not smooth sailing, though. My symptoms, depression being the worst of them, made it an arduous time. Thankfully, after tweaks in my medication and habits, working myself, and help from lots of loving people, I've come a long way. All this progress has been a true day-by-day process. I think in the future I might look back on this challenging time and say, you know what? I'm glad that happened. I don't think I'm there yet, though. However, I've learned important lessons which I'll share now. First, I've learned how freeing it can be to express deeper aspects of myself. It's easy to see someone crying and talking about their suffering as weak, but when one of my friends opens up to me about something bitter and personal, I see true strength. I'm only able to get the help and support I need by honestly describing what I'm feeling, and I try to appreciate when a friend must do the same. A pivotal moment for me in my story came when I found someone who I felt could understand me, a longtime friend named Trevor. I had been family friends with him for years, but he didn't tell me about his migraines, which he'd had for 8 years, until hearing about my condition. We related to each other in many ways, and I shared things with him that I hadn't been able to with anyone else. After just a 45-minute conversation where I was able to be truly vulnerable for the first time in a long time with him, I felt strong, alive, and as if I'd regained some parts of myself which I'd forgotten existed. As we finished talking, I remember the sky releasing an epic thunderstorm. As rain splattered down, I felt my mind relax. Trevor helped me realize that I wasn't crazy and that my sickness wasn't all in my head. I hope we can all find and also be a Trevor, someone who listens with an open mind and allows one to forgive themselves. Another thing I've learned about is the power of acceptance. To me, acceptance was always synonymous with submission and passivity. It no longer is. During my sickness, I've spent a lot of time quarreling with my identity and gaslighting myself. I spent time every day thinking that my condition is self-generated and that if I were to just act a different way, all my pain would vanish. Self-hate, crippling doubt, and anxiety are all symptoms of this struggle. It's hard to escape self-blame. It feels like a 50-pound weight which you're always carrying in your backpack. After over a year of living in my post-COVID body, I still fight to convince myself that I have a real medical condition. I idolize and envy my pre-COVID self, even though I live a much more meaningful life now. Before my sickness, I had confused acceptance with resignation. Here's the difference. Resignation is a submissive action. Acceptance is an intentional and active one. Acceptance involves forgiving yourself, learning to love yourself, and showing your true self to other people. For me, it's sometimes being all right with having to rest instead of going out to a party, and not second-guessing myself when I stay home. It's being able to tell my family and my friends that my suffering seems insurmountable without feeling like a burden and that it's my fault. Along with vulnerability and acceptance, I've learned a lot about gratitude. In my most intense moments of suffering, I used the power of gratitude to center myself. Last summer, there was a period when the side effects of my medication made it risky for me to go outside alone. I'd see flashing lights and had trouble walking a lot of the time. I spent most of my day in bed in a dark room, often barely eating. However, if I could work up the appetite, I'd find a friend to accompany me across the park to get a hot fudge sundae at Ben & Jerry's. Before COVID, this journey would have seemed like a normal part of life. During this time, this journey was a lot more than that. The mint chip ice cream and the person accompanying me gave me a reason to smile and to be grateful. Gratitude for my friend Johnny lasts a lot longer than a sugar high, and it's a lot more potent. When I'm feeling my worst, I often go in the shower and try to think of all of my reasons to be grateful. I first think of my loving family, then my wonderful friends, all the people at school, and everyone else who has brought light into my life. This simple meditation can be crucial during my lowest lows. When I think about acceptance, vulnerability, and gratitude, I always arrive at the same thing: the power of love. Love is one of those things that I think about a lot, but I can't really come to a definition for. It's a transcendent feeling, a force, and a million other things. Ultimately, love is that which connects all of us. By tapping into it, we can live more meaningful, more integrated, and simpler lives. After losing a big homecoming basketball game one year, I climbed the bleachers to talk to my assistant coach Nelson, seeking his wisdom, which is so legendary at my school. When I think of Coach Nelson, I think of various creatures famous for their wisdom throughout media. Take the three-eyed raven in Game of Thrones, Yoda, or Mr. Miyagi. I asked him, after the game, how did I play? He responded, how do you think you played? Both he and the head coach loved to answer my questions with their own questions. It feels like torment, and it is, but it's really their best way of helping me a lot of the time. I will now try to do something similar. I could stand here and say, listen better or be more vulnerable, but I don't think that is my place. Instead, I will pose a few questions, and I ask that you really think about them. How much of a burden could be lifted off of your shoulders if you accept your suffering for what it is and learn to forgive yourself for its existence? How much freer would your life be if you could articulate your whole being and let people into the most guarded parts of yourself? And finally, how can you recognize and be grateful for the beauty of all the everyday things and people that make your life special, but that you still may take for granted? There have been so many people who helped me get through the past year and a half. I hope you never underestimate the impact that just a smile or some words of encouragement can have. And I hope you always remember your radiance and your ability to lift others up. Amen.